Welcome back, family, to part 2 of our series, The Awakening of Yasharal, From Curses to Covenant. In part 1, we exposed the lie and reclaimed the name. In part 2, we uncover the evidence, the identity markers Yahweh himself gave us in Deuteronomy 28, Ha-Dabarayim. The words. These curses are not just ancient consequences. Think of them as prophetic fingerprints. They tell the story of a people scattered, broken, and still standing. And that people is Yasharal. Deuteronomy 28:68 says, "Thou shalt see it no more again." We're about to uncover what that refers to. Before we dive into the curses, let's briefly revisit what we covered in part 1. We restored the name Yasharal, broke down its meaning in Paleo-Hebrew, the original ancient Hebrew, not Assyrian or Masoretic influenced modern Hebrew, and exposed the identity theft that began with colonization and religious deception. We also discovered the meaning of Yasharal, he who rules as a prince of Elohim. We contrasted modern false labels like Jew, Black, and Israelite with the true covenantal name. We examined scriptures like Psalms 83 and Jeremiah 17:4 to see how prophecy told us we'd lose our heritage, but also regain it. Today, we go deeper. But before we dive deeper, we must establish a firm foundation. History books can be debated, rewritten, and erased by those in power. But if you believe the word of Yahweh, scriptural history is not up for debate. It is truth sealed by prophecy. While man can conquer and conceal, Yahweh reveals. And in these last days, as Daniel declared, knowledge is increasing. That means lies are breaking and the truth is rising. Let's now look at what both prophecy and historical evidence make unmistakably clear. The disconnection of a people was foretold, and it's being reversed. Genesis 15:13 says, "And he said to Abram, know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Yasharal was enslaved in Egypt only during the time of a Pharaoh who knew not Yosef or Joseph, which says simply, then a new sovereign arose over Misraim, which is Egypt, who did not know Yosef." So that tells us exactly, very specifically, about something that's key for us to understand. Genesis 15:13, it aligns on 400 years, very specific. And Exodus 1:8 lets us know something very specific as well, because that gives us a signal of when Yasharal were enslaved in Egypt. Yasharal was also in Egypt longer than 400 years. Exodus 12:40 tells us, "And the sojourn of the children of Yasharal who lived in Misraim was 430 years." So Genesis 15:13 is a prophecy about another time, because the 430 years Yasharal was in Egypt were not a time of slavery or oppression. Not entirely. Only during the time when Yosef was known to the Pharaoh, meaning Yasharal would not be treated favorably and would ultimately be enslaved. In Acts 7:6, Stephen quotes Genesis 15:13, where he says his seed would be a stranger and be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. Look it up, Acts chapter 7, verse 6. Again, no direct link to Egypt by name. Deuteronomy 28:68, Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Now, that's not a literal Egypt, but is symbolic of bondage. In other words, Babylon, America, Arabia, that type of bondage. Barak 2:30 says, in the land of their captivity, they shall remember themselves. You see, this fits this current awakening, not the Egyptian exodus when Yasharal still knew who they were. So there's some keys here that we should observe. That slavery and oppression and loss of identity, they were prophesied, and we'll show that. We'll also identify and prove the curses are exclusive to one people. And then we'll connect Deuteronomy to real world history and prophecy. And that connection, let's start that now. In 1503, slaves were taken to the island of Santa Tome. That's when the slave trade began in earnest, or preliminarily, however you want to identify it. But that's when the slaves were taken from Portugal to the island of Santa Tome. Then in 1619, that's when the first slave ships landed in Virginia. In 1619, that's in the Americas. Then 1711, ships began to arrive in other places. Congo was colonized and exploited. In 1928, Brazil went through a revolutionary time. And in fact, Brazil had the largest number, as far as a country, Brazil has the largest number of enslaved Yasharal. Then in 2024, which is, we'll just say present day, this because we're beyond 2024. As we record this, we're in 2026, but it's the same. It's Babylon. Babylon. This is where we are in this present day. And Babylon is the Americas. Babylon is Europe. Babylon is Arabia. So that's the historical timeline. Then the scriptural timeline, Deuteronomy 28:28, madness and blindness. Those are things that occurred to the children of Yasharal. And as well as in verse 28, it talks about bewilderment of heart. These are things that happen to Yasharal. Deuteronomy 28:48, yoke of iron bondage happened to Yasharal. And then verse 68, they were sent by ships. So as we go through this, we are going to identify who these people are of Deuteronomy 28, and it will be clear. Yahweh's covenant wasn't just about blessings. Disobedience came with consequences, detailed, generational, and undeniable. These curses would cling to Yasharal as identity markers, not something to be proud of, but they are identity markers. They're fingerprints. And they weren't random. They were designed to follow and identify the true covenant people, even when the world forgot who they were. The cracks in the covenant tablets you see here, it represents slavery, sickness, exile, and loss of name. All of those things are part of the curse. We hear and talk about breaking generational curses, which is true, something that we should be doing. But it's not about our immediate family. It's about the entire nation of Yasharal. The curses mentioned in Deuteronomy 28 are on the entire nation of Yasharal, not just a few families. And these curses have been on us for generations. Enslavement by ships. No other people in history match this prophecy other than Yasharal. You shall go into Egypt again with ships. And again, Egypt is symbolic of bondage. The transatlantic slave trade saw over 12 million of our ancestors taken from the western coast of Africa to the Americas. These were primarily Shemites, descendants of Shem, and not Hamites, descendants of Ham. These people were primarily majority Shemites. They are of the ancestral line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So they cannot be Hamites because they're not of that ancestral line. Yasharal are Shemites. There's a difference between Shemites and Hamites. One is in covenant with Yahweh, and the other is not. The Arab slave trade stole millions more across the Red Sea and the Sahara. This is not a coincidence. It's covenant prophecy fulfilled. Verse 68 continues. You shall be sold to your enemies, and no one will buy you. This isn't about a failed transaction. It's about total dehumanization. Our people were renamed, branded, stripped of language and legacy, and are called bywords like Negro, colored, Black, African American, and so forth. But that has never been who we are. Religious systems kept us blind to this fact, calling us Gentiles when we were and are actually the lost sheep. So verses 30 through 48 detail the horrors of slavery. Families were ripped apart, forced labor, yokes of iron. Verse 32 says, your sons and daughters shall be given to another people. We see this fulfilled in auction blocks, breeding farms, and sterilization programs. The yoke of iron was literal and symbolic of spiritual oppression. This is chattel slavery, which refers to a system where individuals are treated as personal property to be bought, sold, and owned for life. It's not indentured servitude. Unlike other forms of forced labor, it is legally defined by several brutal factors. Brutal factor 1, total ownership. Enslaved people were viewed as commodities, similar to livestock and equipment. Brutal factor number 2, generational status. Any children born to an enslaved person automatically became the property of the enslaver. And brutal factor number 3, dehumanization. The legal framework that stripped individuals of all rights, reducing their existence to a financial asset. This is Yasharal's pain, but also her proof. It is the fingerprint that identifies who Yasharal actually is. All these things are just that. They are a fingerprint of identity. So if you locate the people aligned with the curses of Deuteronomy 28, you'll find Yasharal, the covenant people of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 28:37 says, we will become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword, and a mockery among all the peoples. Then in verse 64, it says Yahweh would scatter us among all peoples. So Yahweh scattered us among the same people who mocked us. So that means zero chance of being respected until the curses are lifted. Even then, the consequences remain. Today, we find descendants of Yasharal across the Americas, Europe, the Caribbean, and beyond, living in ghettos, facing discrimination, and mocked in every tongue. That global rejection, it's a prophetic identity confirmation. When we accept the scripture and aligned history, there's no denying who the covenant people are. And do you recognize the covenant people? It's not hard. They are everywhere. We are everywhere. Well, some say this is just a coincidence. But the historical records prove otherwise. Transatlantic and Arab slave trade records match the curses. We know this from chattel slavery records. Some documentaries are helping uncover the truth about a nation of people living under these curses. This is not so much an endorsement of the documentaries as an acknowledgement of the effort to discover and reveal who the covenant people are. Considered controversial by some as Ronald Dalton's Hebrews to Negroes, and the Whited Out series documents who the covenant people are in detail. They don't use Paleo-Hebrew or original Hebrew names and may not be 100% accurate, but they are close and help show what has unfolded in history. They do so with much more accuracy than in any other documentary that I'm aware of. And now we introduce the Babylon Audit Checklist. It's a tool to help us test what we've inherited versus what has been forced upon us as Yasharal, so we can make an informed choice to return to the truth of our covenant relationship with Yahweh. So more about the checklist in a moment. You see, these curses weren't left in the past. They're alive today. Police killings, prison systems, food deserts, generational poverty. These aren't just social issues. Health disparities are caused in part by the forced and now normalized eating of unclean foods described in Deuteronomy 14. Pork, breakfast and link sausage, pork chops, ribs, bacon. Shellfish like shrimp, crab, lobster, crawfish. Fish without fins and scales like catfish and eels. Eating these scripturally identified unclean foods is not only disobedience, but it is a major source of health issues among the nation of Yasharal. These curses are prophetic indicators. Verse 45 says these curses will follow us and overtake us until we are destroyed. We are still being destroyed, but Yahweh's remnant is rising. Hadabarayim 28, or Deuteronomy 28, verses 15 through 68, isn't isolated. It's echoed all throughout Scripture. Quana, Lamentations 5, shows our national mourning. Joel 3, Yahweh, reveals the nations that sold us and why judgment is coming. And something interesting here about what we see in Joel 3. we see the ancient names of Tyre, Zidon or Sidon, Philistia, Sheba, Arabia, Grecians or Yawin. We see these names, and they have a certain region that they are part of. Southern Lebanon, which is Phoenicia, northern Lebanon, the Gaza region, southwest Canaan, the Arabian Peninsula, the Aegean region. These are all the nations that seek to destroy and wipe out Yasharal. So their modern names are Lebanon, obviously, the Palestinians, Gaza Strip area, Saudi Arabia, Arab states, Greece, Southern Europe. They're all part of those who wish to destroy Yasharal. And then we also see in Amos, again, Tyre, Zidon, Philistia, Edom, or Edom. Again, this is Europe. And Europe also was part of receiving these slaves because they were trafficking. Human trafficking isn't a modern day thing. This happened in ancient times as well. So again, Tyre and Zidon basically is Lebanon, and they sold slaves to Europe, Edom, Philistia, that's Gaza, Palestinians. They sold to Egypt. They sold to Europe as well. And then Edom itself was the recipient. And who is Edom? Not only did they buy and enslave, but that is Rome, Europe, USA. Not a pretty picture. Yahweh is calling his people out of confusion. He says, come out of her and be separate. Galawa, or Revelations 18:4 says, come out of her, my people. So this is where we introduce the checklist again. And this checklist helps us do just that. It helps us come out if we choose to do so. Unless we're so indoctrinated that we either reject or can't see truth. And that's just fact. I'm just speaking truth. It examines our worship, calendar, language, leadership, and practice. Whether you're walking Hadarak, which is the way, or still awakening, this is a tool to return to the covenant. The time for excuses is over. It's time to realign. So the checklist is available in the video description. Let's end with a question. Who on this earth matches every curse of Deuteronomy 28? Who was enslaved, scattered, renamed, and mocked, yet still remains? The answer is Yasharal. And Barak 2:30 says, they shall remember themselves in the land of their captivity. That moment is now. Family, it's time to return. Sound the shofar. Wake up the remnant. Yasharal is rising. Stay tuned for part 3, where we dive deeper into the disconnection of a people. Shalom.